Geelong. This fixture does my head in every single year. Well, we've reached the halfway point of the year. We're 6-6, or pretty much the halfway point of the year, and we are playing Geelong. This is not a fixture any of us have enjoyed in recent times. We have lost 19 of the last 22 matches between the two clubs, and we have been thrashed most times. We just do not compete against Geelong. It's been that way for the best part of 2 decades. I'm as sick of it as all you are, and I fear that we're going to have another big loss coming this week.
Just get it over with.
But we still got to play the game. We've got to analyse it, and maybe we can learn something about it. And if you watch this channel, I'm going to provide some interesting information which may give Essendon a bit of hope as to how they could possibly cause an upset, as unlikely as that might seem. So, the ladder as it stands, Geelong are 9 wins, 4 losses, a percentage of 126. Essendon are 6-6 with a percentage of 85. There's a pretty big difference between the two teams if you look at their for and against, about 6 goals difference. Geelong did have a win over Gold Coast last week by 24 points. Neil was listed as injured, so we'll see if he is out of the team. That would probably help us because obviously being a tall forward marking player, he does take a lot of marks close to goal. It's one thing Geelong are very good at. They're good at getting scoring shots in that close range, close to goal. So we'll see if he gets up for that. The obvious in, even though it's not a like-for-like, would probably be Bailey Smith, who was out last week as a late out for Geelong. Well, for the Bombers, obviously we're going to have at least one out. That would be Sam Durham. And I think the logical in is probably Elijah Sartis. Sartis has been playing well in the reserves. People have been criticising his kicking and all that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, I don't really think that's the reason he's not in the team. I think he's really not in the team at the moment because we actually do have quite a lot of depth in the midfield and there's not really a logical spot for him. I mean, some people have said that why can't he get in the team because of the injuries? Well, the injuries are just not in his position. I mean, in recent times, we've had, Merritt, Durham, Parrish is back in the team last week. Martin, Caldwell. So there's 5 pretty good midfielders. Even Sheila's in the reserves. But really his best chance is if one of those players is injured. And now that Sam Durham is out, Sartis most likely, I think, will come in. I actually think Hobbs, who's not really been performing, should be out of the side. We talk about Sartis' kicking. Hobbs can't kick, guys. I mean, it's not so much a technical problem, but he can't kick with any distance. He can't kick seemingly more than about 35 metres. And if Sartis is not in the team because of his kicking, well, Hobbs shouldn't be in the team either, especially given that Sartis actually gets the ball more than Hobbs. So I think Sartis in for Durham is a possibility. I think Hobbs is a possible out. I suspect they'll probably play Goldstein and maybe rest him for the trip to Fremantle just because it's a trip to Perth. Probably wise to rest him for the travel game rather than the game in Melbourne against the big-bodied Geelong side. So it could be someone like perhaps Archer Day Wicks coming out of the side. Possible ins, Redman, if he's fit. It seemed like a minor injury, although with Essendon, you never know. These 1 to 2 week injuries or minor injuries sometimes turn into 6 to 8 week injuries. Sartis in, obviously. And just a left field one. Blackiston could be an in, playing on the half-back line. He played, and if you saw my video on the VFL, Blackiston played in the back line. He was picked up as a ruckman in the mid-season draft, and he's from Western Australia. But he played at centre-half back in the reserves, and he had 11 intercept possessions, and he played well. He actually looked like he belonged down there. So I have no idea what his history of playing in the back line is at junior level. He's 26 years old. He may have played some positions in the back line in the Waffle before this year. I don't know his history down there, but he took 11 intercept possessions, and I would suggest that he coming into the side to shore up the back line, especially if Neil still plays, because I got Cameron down there as well, could be a goer. He is 200 centimetres, he's 26 years old, he's a mature player, and he looked pretty good in that position last week. So that's a bit of a left field suggestion. Brad Scott has shown that he's prepared to debut players. We've debuted more than any other team this year. So there's some possible changes. Durham coming out, Hobbs out, perhaps Day Wicks in, Redmond, Sartis, and maybe Blackiston. That's more of a hypothetical than a prediction, but just going by the way the VFL went on the weekend, I think that's something to consider. So how can we beat Geelong? Well, there is a very, very interesting number, and this is really, really interesting. And that goes towards time in possession and how teams can beat Geelong and how they can have a lot of success over Geelong. So the average time in possession in the AFL for a club is 41%. So one team has it 41% of the time, the opponent has it 41% of the time on average, and 18% of the time, nobody has it. It's up for grabs. So since the start of 2023, so we're talking about 2.5 years now, when Geelong's opponents have a time in possession greater than the AFL average, so greater than 41%, Geelong is 4 wins and 20 losses. When Geelong's opponents have a time in possession less than the AFL average, so less than 41%, Geelong is 29 wins and 0 losses. So that is quite amazing when you think about it. So if you have a time in possession of 42% against Geelong, you are about an 80% chance of winning. The trick is, can you do that? GWS have managed to do that with quite a bit of success by changing angles and making Geelong defend in a different way. That's happened. They've beat them 4 times in a row down there at Cardinia Park. Look, if you give Geelong equal opportunity with the footy, you almost can't beat them because their system is so good. You really have to outpossess them. We've been a high possession team this year. You wonder whether we can have a time in possession higher than 41%. I don't know. Geelong are very, very good. They've got a very, very good system. And the very, very good teams are good at shutting us down and denying us the ball. But the reality is that if you have a time in possession higher than 41% against Geelong, you're an 80% chance of winning. It's just, can that be achieved? So look, I thought that was an interesting stat. It is something to hang your hat on, something that the coaches should be looking at. If I'm looking at it on this channel, you'd hope that the coaches would be, right? So it is something to take into account of how the Cats could be beaten, not just from the Bombers, but for any club. For what it's worth, if you're interested, the last time we played Geelong last year, Saturday night match at the MCG, where we lost by 45 points, our time in possession was 39%. Now, that was a 45-point loss, but if you do remember that loss, we were absolutely destroyed by the umpires. Absolutely destroyed. And I'm not one to blame umpires normally, but we were absolutely destroyed. There were some key decisions that went against us, which totally changed the flow of the game. We were actually in a winning position at one point, and then we dropped our heads and Geelong ran all over us in the last half. So we had 39% last time. We'll see how that goes this time. In that match last year, there are a number of changes. We had at least 10 players play in that match who may not play this week. The players that played last year that won't be playing in the match on Saturday: Menzies, Ridley, Mackay, Durham, Harrison Jones, Hind, Langford, Heppel, Draper and Stringer. And the ins, and we are obviously making assumptions on the lineup, but the ins will be Kako, Roberts, Lual, I'm just assuming he holds his spot in the team, Pryor, Angus Clark, Caddy, Hobbs, Setterfield, Zach Johnson. So there's a number of changes. We're talking about 10 changes there from last year to this year. So it's half a team, really. So you can't really draw too many comparisons to that match last year. So what are some of Geelong's strengths? It's always interesting to look at the things that Geelong are particularly good at or that our opponents are particularly good at. So one interesting number is kick differential. Geelong have a plus 18.8 kick differential. They have 18 kicks more than the opposition. We have minus 7.8. But have a look at this. Handball differential. We are number 1 in the competition, plus 24. Geelong are minus 25.5. We have been handball happy. We have an average of 24 more handballs than the opposition. So that's something that I think we need to fix up. I think a 2-to-1 ratio of kicks to handballs, in my opinion, is probably ideal. The most successful teams, obviously, are the ones that go direct. The longest kicking team in the competition this year is actually the Gold Coast. So you can take that for what it's worth. Uncontested possession differential, Essendon are plus 10.5. Geelong are minus 14. Geelong are much more efficient with how they use the ball. They don't sort of just chip it around, but they do maintain possession in a very efficient way. It's interesting when you look at that because from what I was just previously talking about, you need to outpossess Geelong and have a possession, number higher than 42% to win the match. And yet Geelong have negative 14 uncontested possession differential with their opponents. But it's how Geelong use the ball. They don't just chip it around. They're very direct and they always kick it to advantage. That's the thing. They always kick it to advantage and they punish the opposition. Loose ball gets differential. Geelong's number 1 in the competition, plus 7.2. We are plus 1.2. And marks differential, Essendon are minus 12.7. Geelong are plus 10.5. We like to think of ourselves as an uncontested team that takes uncontested marks, but the problem is our opponents take just as many marks as we do when we play them, and Geelong average a lot more marks per game than their opponents. Points scored in forward half. Geelong are the number 1 team in the competition where scores come from turnovers or chains that started in their forward half. They're number 1 with 48.9 points. We are second last with 33.3 points. So what does Essendon need to do to stay competitive in this match? Well, just in terms of some individual players that I think can fix a few minor things in their game, I think Caddy, for a start, needs to stop running under the ball. I noticed this against Carlton, where he's timing his leaps quite poorly at the moment. I think he's running sort of 4 or 5 metres under the ball. I think if he can fix that up, that's not a minor thing. If you can fix that up, that could be the difference between kicking 3 goals and kicking 1 goal. So I think he probably starts to stop running under the ball. I think Kako as well needs to start hitting the scoreboard. Now, at some point, it's a possibility Kako could, be demoted to the reserves. He's been played in the seniors for every game, and that's fair enough. But at some point, he does need to start hitting the scoreboard. He had 1 kick on the weekend. He did have 9 handballs, and I know he's been doing a lot of pressure acts, and the coaching staff would notice all this. But he is in the team as a small forward, and at some point, he does need to start hitting the scoreboard. So I'd love to see it if he does that. We need to play our possession game up to a point, but we need to do so in an attacking fashion, and that's the key. We need to hold on to the ball. We need to maintain at least over 40% possession, but we need to do it by transitioning. We need to do it by zigzagging across the ground at points, and we need to force Geelong to defend. We can't just let Geelong do what they want. We need to be proactive and get them to chase us. We also can't just bomb it straight down the throat of Tom Stewart, who I'm sure if we do is going to take a lot of intercept possessions. Intercept possessions are just a key in the AFL. Turnovers are the biggest score source in the AFL, and you just can't kick it to their best defender. So we have to be careful with how we use the ball, but we have to also be attacking and bold with our ball movement. So we can't just be stationary. That's the key. Yes, we can maintain possession, but we can't be stationary when we maintain possession. We must be always on the move. Geelong don't like that. That's the way teams can beat Geelong when Geelong does rarely lose a game. It's because they have to man up defensively and the game isn't played on their terms. We need to play the game on our terms. I would try to keep the ball out of the hands of Brian Myers. Brian Myers is probably the most underrated player in the AFL. Whenever he gets the ball, he invariably finds a teammate and he finds them often inside 50. And this is why Geelong are so smart. They use a player like Myers kind of forward of centre so that most of his possessions, when he gets them, he can then find an opponent inside the forward 50. You don't see him getting as many kicks off half back or in the back pocket or around there. They're usually forward of centre, and that's why they're so smart. And I wish we would use our players in a similar way. And if you allow Myers to get uncontested possession, he will kill you. He averages 17 uncontested possessions a game, and quite a lot of them he finds in the forward 50. We're probably going to need a little bit of luck. We're going to probably need to kick accurately. We might need the umpires on our side. We might need a few things going our way. That's just the thing against Geelong. I just hope that we can play the game on our terms and not on their terms. I've got a lot of good players in their side. Tom Atkins, Bailey Smith will most likely come back in. Max Holmes, Zach Guthrie, Tom Stewart, Lawson Humphries, Jeremy Cameron, Ollie Dempsey down there. And they're smart with how they play. They get a lot of goals close in. They make sure that they're efficient with the way they use the ball. They have a lot of shots inside that 25 to 30 metre range. They're going to be a very, very tough team to beat. They always are. Yes, they're beatable. I'm pessimistic. I'm always pessimistic against Geelong, but anyone's beatable. There are 2 teams out there, and if we play a smart game with a bit of luck on our side, you just never know. But what do I realistically think is going to happen? My prediction, well, I'm picking Geelong by 31 points. Everything I've seen from Essendon the last couple of weeks shows me that we're going to fight it out. I think we're going to be competitive for parts of the game. But at the end of the day, Geelong are more experienced. Their bodies are too big as well. They're always a much bigger team when I look at them. I don't know whether it's the hoops, but they always look like they're twice as big as their opponents, the Cats. It's just something I've noticed when I look at them. And it's going to be a very, very tough game. So, yeah, I'm picking Geelong by about 5 goals. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Are you going to the game? Who do you think is going to win? What do you think the margin is going to be? Hopefully we can play the game on our terms, not their terms, to at least give ourselves a chance. I'd at least like to be like a hint that we're a chance to win at some point through the game, even if we don't. That's the problem with the last few games against Geelong, is that we're never really even in the game. It would be fantastic if we're at least in the game with a shot at some point. So let me know what you think. Have a great day, everybody. Subscribe to this channel. And as always, go Bombers.
They all try their best, but they can't get near.